I'm going to be interviewing her today. I'm one of the staff members here at Mischief Management, the company behind BROADWAYCON. I'm one of the program managers, so I helped to develop the schedule. And then in my other life, I have also been an actor, an educator. I'm very passionate about gender and sexuality as topics, and I'm a theater grad student, so many hats. But I'm very excited to be interviewing Alicia today. So I just wanted to get started by allowing you to introduce a little bit about yourself and your work. For anybody who might not know, what is an intimacy director?
Sure. I want to make sure first, is this right? Can y'all hear me from here? Yeah? Okay, wonderful. My name is Alicia Rodis. Nice to meet you all. And I'm an intimacy director or an intimacy choreographer or coordinator. What that basically is a specialist that is brought into an artistic environment, theater, film, etc., and is there to help facilitate scenes of intimacy. So if there is nudity, there is a sex scene, but there are plenty of other things on the spectrum. We're movement coaches, which helps everyone sell the story, tell the story, but we're also advocates for actors. So that if we're in a situation where someone might feel that they are being, and we'll get into that later, that they are being othered or are being made to feel unsafe, we help advocate for the actors as well. And some of that is just facilitating the situation as far as making sure we know what boundaries are in play, and then everyone agrees to exactly what story it is we're telling.
Thank you. What kind of projects have you worked on so far?
So I come from the theater in general. Went to a conservatory program, worked as an actor for a long time, but also worked in the fight world as well as a fight director, and I got into stunts as well. So I come from a lot of off-Broadway sort of theater and regional theater where I started doing this practice. And we were quickly brought into universities as well because, as you can imagine, there are a lot of conservatories and university training that oftentimes when there is an intimate scene, they say, okay, figure it out, go for it. Or you're in theater and you're doing a production and they're like, okay, it's text, so kiss. and that's the end of it. And not only are we potentially putting someone in an unsafe position because we're not talking about it, but we're also ruining a great opportunity for storytelling. They kiss is right up there with they fight. There's a lot more involved there. And so my specialty has been coming in and curating, choreographing those moments. So a lot of that is in regional theater, university theater, also setting protocols and for the different theaters. I work at Juilliard, I'm at Michigan State, Michigan University. I have created programs for Yale School of Drama with my colleagues, as well as New York University is currently what we're working with. Outside of that, I work a lot in film and TV, so I currently am on full contract with HBO right now. So I am the intimacy coordinator, or at least the consultant for all of their shows. As well as training new intimacy coordinators and choreographers to go out on all of their shows. So they are keeping me quite busy.
How is it different working with HBO on their shows versus working in the theater?
So it's different mediums, I was, and oftentimes these are shows that may have some really inflammatory or really involved intimacy. I worked on Slave Play at Yale School of Drama before it came out to off-Broadway, and then one of my colleagues, Claire Warden, took over. So in general, when you're working in, everything is on the same principles. And I have a company called Intimacy Directors International that we founded in 2015 that, by myself and 2 other movement directors, that go by these 5 pillars, which is context, consent, communication, choreography, and closure. So that's the path that we always go down when we're doing this, regardless of if it's in theater or it's in film. In theater, we are brought in like any other designer would be brought in, like a fight director, like a lighting director, anyone else that would be coming in. We are part of those production meetings because the movement is going to change depending on what kind of house we're in. The movement's going to change depending on who it is that's doing the movement, what the story is, and we could read one thing on a script, but the director is going, and the producers are going to come back and have their idea of what exactly this is. And then we also have the actors, which seems like such an afterthought. It's like, well, you read the script, you know what's going to happen. But that's not true. Just because I agreed to play Dulcinea in a show, you know, yes, I've read the script. There is a sexual assault that happens in that. Cool, I'm aware of that. But if I walk in on day one as the actor and I'm told, so we really want her to have her clothes ripped off, so we're going to have you topless in this. Well, that's information that I never consented to and we never talked about. So part of being an intimacy director both for stage and for film is making sure the actors know exactly what the story is that the directors are agreeing on. As far as the big differences, you know, it's time. Time and also medium, because you can hide things so much easier with different camera angles. Versus, and the camera only has one eye, so even cheating certain things, like you would shoot a punch, is very different than if we're doing, say, a show in the round. And I was just working on Miss Julie at Classic Stage Company, and we're in the round, and there's this very blatant, open sex scene. It's like, okay, so how are we going to mask this? How are we going to mask this so it works 8 shows a week? And how are we going to work it so that the actors know the choreography and have it down specifically so they can be consistent 8 shows a week and not just, I'm not feeling it anymore, so I'm going to go further, which is a lot of what we're coming from in theater. I know I'm giving a very long answer to this question.
Totally fine.
But I'm just going to riff if that's all right. A lot of the experiences that we are coming from, and myself, I came from a lot of these experiences as an actor, where I would play a role that had some intimacy in it, and we would set what it was, or maybe we just wouldn't talk about it because no one talked about it. And then the first night, you know, okay, wow, there's a lot of endorphins and things are going on, great, great. And then we do it a few more nights and we find a consistency. But then, oh, I'm not feeling it anymore, so this kiss is gonna go longer. Now hands are starting to move. And all of a sudden, you're in a social hostage and professional hostage situation of feeling like you have to feel everything and you have to go further. When one, you didn't get consent for that. 2, now this crowd is getting a different story than this crowd. You know, so why not? Why not set that and explore it? At the end of the day, it's not about our catharsis as much as we'd like it to be as actors. It is about telling the story and telling it right. So, so in theater, there's more rehearsal time that is usually necessary than sometimes in film, but it's not black or white. And we set it so that everyone is safe, and they are safe to the point that they can do this same movement over and over again. 8 shows a week for as long as they need to.
Thank you. I'm curious, so for folks who may not come from a theater background, if you're doing a fight scene, if you have to throw a punch or take a punch, perhaps more importantly, in a show you usually do a fight call beforehand, where you run through everything, you check in with your scene partner, you make sure everyone is okay to do the scene that day before the show, fix anything if necessary and tighten it up because there's such a risk of harm when you're doing those kinds of things live. And I'm curious if there's any kind of equivalent in the intimacy direction world.
Yeah, there is. We have intimacy calls.
Yeah.
Intimacy calls, and sometimes if it's a simple moment of intimacy, there's a kiss, something that is not as involved, that might not have to have the specificity of that movement or extra safety, then we might call it a consent call, where 2 people just meet as everyone's warming up. They have a moment before they get ready into hair and makeup and go, hey, how you doing? Good, how are you doing? Good. You good today? Yeah, great. Simple, simple, simple. But something to say, hey partner, hey human, hey coworker, we're going to be doing this together tonight. How are you feeling? Great. and then moving on. We also do full intimacy calls. During slave play, there's and I'm not sure, have any of you gotten to see slave play off Broadway? Cool, well, it's been sold out the whole time, so that's okay. Hopefully it'll come back. But there's a huge amount of intimacy in it. And so we had 5 or 6 full-on penetrative sex scenes that were happening during this. And so every night we had a fight call and we had an intimacy call. And they didn't necessarily have to go through everything by, they didn't have to put all of their emotion into it and do it full out, but we made sure by the numbers everything was set. And the actors got a chance to check in with each other and be like, you good? You good? Great. Also, did anything happen last night that was off? No? Great. So very much like the fight world, the intimacy world also gets its own due diligence. It's that idea, like, this has been a theatrical black hole for us for so long, when we just started talking about it, unless there's violence in it. Then we're old pros. But when we have people being in these highly vulnerable situations who are already trained to say yes and to everything, because that's the actor motto, yes and, yes and. If you say no, you're a problem. If you say no, then you'll never work again. None of these things are true. So part of doing this is shining a light on that and saying, hey, we can treat this just like any other artistic moment of the show.
Very cool. What does the process of directing or choreographing or coordinating a scene or in fact a whole show look like when you start it? What's your first step when you come into a room?
So my first step is there's pre-production work. There's a conversation that happens between me and the director, sometimes with the artistic director. Hopefully I'm brought in before we've had our first rehearsal so that I can also, we were doing the Rape of Lucrece at Manhattan Shakespeare Exchange. And before we started, the director and I had a meeting, and I was like, what is the scope of this intimacy? What are you looking for? And this is a director I worked with as a fight director plenty of times before. And I was like, and it was the same thing. What are the weapons? What's the world we're in? What's the scope of this? What do you want your actors to be able to do? And if I want my Mercutio to be a phenomenal fighter. It's like, so we have to think about that during casting. I want my Lucrece to be able to have this and this and this happen to her and to show this. So we have to think about that in casting. So the consultation starts before we even go into casting. And then hopefully at the first read-through, it's something that has a whole lot going on. And there is a conversation that also says, if you feel like you are unsafe, you have an exit and you have someone to report harassment to. It's got to be a part of it. A lot of this came out of artistry, but it also came out of our culture of silence and assumption. So in order to do this right, you also have to address that there is a way for someone to have a voice if they feel they don't have a voice. So that's part of it, and then there's a conversation, usually designer presentation. I talk about how I work, and then when we get into the room to choreograph, it's oftentimes a lot like how fight work goes. I know what your blocking is and where we're going to, and now we're going to go into crafting this scene. We know beforehand exactly what they're okay with and what they're not okay with. We know where our boundaries are, and we work within that. And the rest of it is choreography.
Cool. I have lost my list of questions. There we go. I'm curious, is there anything in that pre-production process or in discussing with a director that would make you say no to a project?
Yeah, sure.
Has that happened to you? You don't necessarily have to name names, but
yes.
What would that look like? What would make you say no to a project?
I'm really open to a lot of different stories. Like, if they're, I just want to know why. And usually the actor wants to know why. If they're going to be shown nude or doing some really highly sexualized scene, it's like, why? So, and this certainly goes in TV as well, big time, I'll be like, why? And they say, you know what? We want it to be a really hot scene, and this actor has a great body, and we want to show it off. I'm like, awesome, cool, down. Talking to the actor, they know that, they know exactly what this is. Like, Cinemax is run by HBO, okay? I've been on a few of these sets, it's cool. I'm down with this story as long as everyone is aware. But there have been some projects that I've been approached about where they're like, it's this, and they go through, and everyone's trying to catch up with language right now. Everyone's trying to catch up with how it is to address actors and each other, just in terms of our gender and our sexuality. So through that, I usually can help a lot, but there is a certain weighted side of the spectrum that I might not work for. Or it sounds like they don't have safe practices. Like they are beyond my help as a specialist to come in and do this work. I don't run a rehab, so, but I am here as a specialist. I will say the projects are few and far between, but if there is some major issues going on that are beyond my scope, I'm not going to take it. And that's an important part about doing intimacy work. Know when you're in over your head and go to someone else. There are plenty of projects that I've said, you don't need me, you need a full conflict negotiator. Because just like in fights, oh, we're in tech and someone got hurt, could you come in? We get those calls as fight directors, and I get them as an intimacy director as well. And sometimes it's, okay, I can come in and help you with this, but this, you need a conflict negotiator. You need a professional to handle this, or you need a lawyer to handle this. So those are the ones that sometimes I'm like,
not my purview.
Yeah.
Similar to how you would warm up before a fight call or before working on a fight scene, are there warm-ups that you use with actors or recommend to people before they start in on a scene?
We talk less about warm-ups and more about closure practices. Because as an actor, you have your warm-up, and most people have their warm-ups for any scene or going in as an actor, and that's great. For my money, and this is my theory on acting that goes into how I do intimacy work, emotions are a byproduct of the actions we do. So you do an action, and an emotion is probably going to happen because of it. And for years, I had actors, and myself, being like, I'm with this person every night, playing opposite them. And every night I hold them, and they hold me, and I kiss them, and we touch each other, and every night, and I'm starting to get feelings for them, and I don't know why. And it's like, well, I have an idea as to why, because that's what, if I shrug my shoulders and shake and breathe, I'm going to feel scared. And if I breathe and work a certain way with someone, I'm going to start to feel emotions for them. So some of it is about, or really expose and open myself, and then get on the subway and get hurt by a small thing happening to me. So a lot of the stuff that we talk about are closure practices, which is a moment between the actors who have just done a really heightened scene, either sexual, and I do this in my violence practices now too, either sexual or violent or intimate, or even just really emotional, and have a moment between them of just even shaking hands and being like, thank you so much for your work today. Something that says, okay, we are done here. We had very authentic emotions right there. It wasn't real, but it was authentic, and it told the story we wanted to tell. Thank you so much, coworker. Thank you so much, friend. Now we're closing it down and we're walking away. So it's something between the actors, but there's also something that can be between just with an actor on their own. I'm like, what is it you need to do in order to close yourself for the day from what you just experienced? And oftentimes it's how you learn. So if you're a visual learner, it's looking at certain things. If you're an audio learner, you listen to music afterwards. I'm a kinesthetic person, so I want to do a workout after doing something that is really heightened. So yeah, it's really closure practices that we work into things. And I'll say this one last thing, this one last anecdote on it. I was working at an opera in Minnesota. It's Dead Man Walking, which has this really sexual and violent scene. and the actors and the supers that were doing all the violence and sexuality were having, you know, great success with their closure practices, were, you know, had the choreography down. But the stage manager was there every night watching them. And at one point, the stage manager reached out to me and said, "I'm having trouble watching this every night. I know they're okay, but I'm having trouble with this." And I said, "Okay, so let's include you on that closure practice." And so the supers, after they did their scene, instead of doing their closure there, would just walk over on the other side of the stage to where the stage manager was, and in between cues just gave a like, "Hey, we're good, you good? Good," and moved on. And just that one little moment of closure is all we need as humans sometimes, just to have that psychological quarantine. We're good, everybody's good.
Interesting, very cool. Shifting gears a little bit, you mentioned this at the beginning, but I was hoping you could elaborate a little bit about how you got into this field, because it's not a thing that is well known. It's sort of emerging at the moment and being created by the people who are doing it. So yeah, I was hoping you could speak a little more about that.
Sure. I'm an actor at heart. That's what I started doing. And by the time I was 14, I started this journey that was a joke through my family of playing every slutty best friend character that there was in a show.
How same.
So, you know, Ado Annie, like, you know, Sarah Gina. If there was a prostitute, I got to play her. So I got into those situations a lot of times of doing intimacy on stage. You know, and I get it, we all fall into types at times, and ingenues even certainly have their fair share of having to do plenty of intimacy. But I had this experience, and there were some experiences I had that were awesome, like really great communication, really great directors, you know. And then I had others where they were still great directors, but we didn't talk about it, or something happened and I was taken advantage of. And I thought to myself, 18, 19-year-old Alicia was like, that's just how it goes. That's what this industry is. You're going to get taken advantage of, you're going to get harassed, and if you don't accept it, then there are hundreds of people behind you who will take it instead. And I felt that way, moving through the beginning of my career. I started to do a lot of fight work. I started to work in stage combat. I started training as a fight director. I started getting into stunts. And I found myself as a fight director often being brought in on sexual assault scenes. And they were like, "Oh, thank God, you're a woman. Can you handle this?"
Oh.
Right, and besides the fact that gender really